Hey guys! In today's Arjuna Thursday episode, I'm going to show you 3 watercolor painting ideas that you can try out using salt. Don't forget to make sure your notifications are turned on by clicking on the bell and by adjusting the settings. And for a chance to get a shout out and to win arts and crafts supplies in my ongoing giveaway, comment down below #makoccino in the first 24 hours. Okay, so for the first painting, we are going to level up our galaxy game by using salt to create unique patterns. Begin by applying a thin coat of water all over the paper until you see a nice glossy finish. Next, load up your brush with water and a light shade of color and apply it to the paper. Here you want to build up the galaxy painting as you would normally do. Start with a light shade and build up the intensity and the darkness of the color one step at a time. I wouldn't use too many different colors, or otherwise you might end up creating a muddy color that you don't want in your design. Another thing to keep in mind is to avoid using too much water. This will not only make it more difficult to create a nice blended effect, but it will also affect the result of the texture when we use salt later. If you notice the colors are way too dark or you use way too much water, simply soak up the excess paint with a dry brush with the help of a tissue paper. Move the paint around until you're happy with the design, and then carefully sprinkle a little bit of salt on top until you evenly cover the paper. Now, different salts have different results. Here I'm using normal table salt, but you can use any other salt you have and test it out. While the first painting is drying, let's prepare the second design you can create using salt. Another fun idea is to create a beautiful ocean with a beach. Begin by applying a thin coat of water all over the paper the same way as we did for the first painting. Next, go ahead and evenly distribute blue color paint starting from the top towards the bottom. Here I mix cool blue color paint with a little bit of lime green color to create a blue shade that is similar to the ocean. And then with a flat brush, I went ahead and distributed the paint from one side to the other while making the shade lighter and lighter the closer I got to the bottom of the painting. Here the water will be a lot less deep compared to the rest. Once we created a gradient layer of paint, we can now go ahead and add the salt on top. Here you want to focus only on certain areas. Add a little bit of the salt to the lower left corner. Here we want to add more paint later. And from this corner you want to sprinkle more salt on top, making sure you leave some space in between. And then again leave a little bit of space and sprinkle some more salt on top. We basically want to create diagonal lines of salt that will turn into white waves later. Now at this point the watercolor should be already in the process of drying, which we can now use to our advantage by creating a cauliflower effect that we usually want to avoid. For this step, load up your brush with lots of water and then apply it on top of the salt. Since the watercolors that we applied to the paper earlier are a lot drier than the water we are applying now, the water will flow into the dry watercolor paint and create a cauliflower effect that I have mentioned in a few videos already. Instead of water, you can also load up your wet brush with dark blue color paint and then add this to a few areas to make them look darker and deeper. If you accidentally use too much water, you can always carefully soak it up with a tissue paper or add more salt on top so the salt can soak it up. While the second painting is drying, we can move on to the third painting. Here we are going to use salt to create fluffy clouds. To make the sky and the clouds look more interesting, I created a gradient effect using yellow, pink, and blue color paint, but you can use any other color combination. Begin by applying a thin coat of water onto the paper again, and then distribute the yellow color paint starting from the top towards the center, making it lighter and lighter. Now you can add pink color paint to the center and blend it upwards into the yellow color by moving the brush from one side to the other and going up and down from time to time. And then repeat the same steps with a blue color paint. To intensify the colors, I went over the applied paint again until I was happy with the result. And now comes the tricky part. To create the clouds, you want to sprinkle the salt slightly in the shape of the clouds. So here I went ahead and added the salt in a wavy shape, leaving some space in between. Now salt does its own thing, so it won't turn out perfectly, but good enough so we can use the texture later. Now let everything completely dry and then we can turn these weird looking patterns into masterpieces. Once the salt and the watercolors are completely dry, carefully remove the salt. You can use your fingers to do that or a tissue paper. I also saw some people use a ruler for that, but you can use whatever you want that works best for you. Now we can use the pattern that the salt has created in the galaxy painting to make it look even more interesting by applying more paint to a few areas and by making the pattern shine through them. I simply added the same colors on top and made a few areas a little bit darker to give the painting more depth. Since you can't be 100% sure how the salt would transform your painting, the result might look different in your painting. So just play around with it and get creative. The lack of control you have kinda sets you free because now you can just experiment and see what you can turn your painting into without being focused on creating an art piece that looked perfect in your head. Once you're happy with the result, you can sprinkle even more salt on top and let it dry again. To make the ocean painting look more interesting, we can now go ahead and add a little bit more paint on top as well. Here I mixed the same blue color again and applied it to a few areas to make the ocean a little bit darker and deeper in some areas. And to create the sand for the beach, you can apply a little bit of yellow color paint and mix in a little bit of brown and then sprinkle a lot of salt on top. The salt will now create the perfect pattern that looks like real sand. Lastly, we can finally adjust the clouds painting as well. As you can see, the salt created these nice fluffy areas that we can now use to make the clouds look more realistic. For this step, use the same shade of color that you used earlier for the first layer of paint and apply it right in between the areas where you added the salt. The pattern that the salt created is basically the top part of each cloud, and we want to create a contrast and more depth by creating a darker area above them. You can also slightly cover a few areas to make them look a little bit faded in. I also create a few more darker areas as shadows on top of the yellow and blue colored areas. Now let everything completely dry, remove any salt that is still left on the paper, and then you can go ahead and add even more details. Here I blended out a few areas in the clouds and added the silhouettes of the trees right below the sky. And I also intensified a few more colors in the galaxy. Once the paint has completely dried, you can use watercolor paint, gouache, or white ink pen to add stars to the galaxy. I also used the same white paint to create a few white waves by creating simple wavy lines right in between the beach and the water area. Lastly, I applied a little bit more yellow color paint to the beach to make the painting look a little bit more interesting. Now you can remove the tape and the paintings are finished. I'm really happy how it turned out, and I'm so surprised how versatile a little bit of salt can actually be. Here are some other paintings I created when I was trying out the salt technique to see what I can create with it. As you can see, you can create different textures and patterns depending on how much or how little salt you use and how much water or how little water you use. So I would recommend to just play around and experiment with this technique to see what you can create. A huge shout out to Karen, thank you so much for watching my videos. I really hope you enjoyed this video and found it helpful. If you did, be sure to give this video a thumbs up to support this channel, and if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and to click on the bell to get notified whenever I upload a new video on Thursdays and on Saturdays. Thank you so much for watching guys, have a wonderful day, and I will see you soon. Bye!